Good morning, friends. It's good to see you all again. And today, since it's Wednesday, we're going to be working on our portal story. And the portal story part that we're working on today is called the climax. Last week, we worked on writing 3 events that happened, the rising action that built tension, that made the reader engage with the story and wonder when they're going to get to the part where the story problem gets solved. How are they going to get there? What's going to happen? Oh my gosh, there's all this stuff that's in the way. And today, when we think about our story going up, 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 climbing that mountain, we're at the top of that mountain today. If you think about some of the stories that we've read, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The rising action was when Augustus Gloop went up the chocolate pipe, when Veruca Salt got shoved down with the squirrels, when Mike TV, he gets changed into a miniature version of himself, when, what's her name, the blueberry girl, she blows up into a blueberry and then has to go be squeezed. That's the rising action. When all the children are gone and it's just Charlie and his grandpa, that's when the climax reaches, and we're going to find out what happens in that story. In Charlotte's Web, it's when all the critters and the Arabelles and everybody that's in that story, they go to the fair. And at the fair, all kinds of things happen to save Wilbur's life. If I think about some movies that I know about, like in all the Toy Story movies, there comes a part near the end where I don't remember what number it is. I think it's number 3, when they are in the trash and they think they're going to get thrown away. And all of a sudden they're going towards the incinerator and they have to get saved from the incinerator. Or in the movie Onward, when all those things have happened, he walks across the invisible bridge. He has to get stopped by the cops. All those different things happen. But then he sails on that giant Cheeto down towards the end of that cavern. And at the end there, he gets the gem, and then something big happens. I'm not going to do total spoilers, but there's always this part at the very end of a movie or near the end of the story where all of it has built up, all this tension and all this excitement, to get to the point where you start to find out what's actually happening in the story. So that's what we're writing about today. So we're at the most exciting part, the climax of the story. Ooh, I know another one, where the wild things are. The wild rumpus is the climax of that story. Max gets over there to the island, things happen, he meets all those wild things. He meets all those wild things, and then he makes them all under his command, and then they have the wild rumpus. And then after that, he sails back home and goes home. And that's what we'll be writing about next week, is the tying up all those loose ends. So today, we're going to be, I'll be modeling my story for you, but I chose not to write it all down today because this is an exciting part of my story. I wanted to also talk about verbs. And by verbs, I mean those action words. So, verbs are action words. Action words are what your character will be doing during the story. And this is like a little kind of fake classroom here, so we have to adjust our expectations for, chart paper falling over and things like that. So verbs are action words. So this is what the character is doing. Now we could write that we ran somewhere. So he ran. He went. So those are verbs that work. But today we're going to be talking about choosing specific verbs that are high quality, interesting verbs. So instead of ran, he could hustle. He could streak. He could catapult. He could, let's see, what else could he do? He could run, he can walk. So those are kind of like the ran and went. And he can do all the hustle, streak, catapult, fly. So these words they kind of tell us in a more secure way, a more exciting way, what your character is doing. And so today, when I wrote my story, I made sure to include verbs that had a lot of meaning that were going to help the reader understand the story a little better. So that's your challenge today as you write your story, is that you are going to include verbs that aren't just like walked, went, got to, because if I said my story is about the character Sophia going to the dragon, Sophia went into the cave. She went up to the dragon. She took the treasure. She went out. She went down. Whoop. Using that word went or go gets really boring for a reader. And so that's why our challenge today is to use these more meaningful verbs. As I get to a verb that I think is a powerful verb, I'm going to go ahead and write it down on the chart paper. But we have to do a little walking backwards for it first and catch up on the story. So I'm going to go back to number 1. One day, my video game machine wouldn't turn on. I tried to fix it by checking the connections, and when I peeked behind the TV, there was a hole in the wall. I knew I shouldn't, but I reached into the hole and was sucked right into the magical portal. When I got to the other side, this is the incredible world I saw. Suddenly, I found myself on a mysterious island. I quickly looked behind myself, but the hole seemed to have disappeared. I decided I had better get familiar with my surroundings since it looked like I wasn't going back home very soon. When I looked around, I saw a beach with crystal blue water lapping at the shores and tall palm trees heavy with coconuts standing high above them. Sea grasses rustled in the gentle breeze and tropical flowers released their fragrances. The sun was shining bright in this golden, beautiful world. As I looked out into the sparkling water, I thought I saw a fin flip and the sound of tinkling laughter rang in my ears. The island was beautiful, comfortable, and safe feeling. I felt like the kind of place where magical things happen and goodness reigned. So that was about the setting. The next part that we talked about was the character. So this is the part where you got to know the character. I was definitely curious about the laughter I heard, so I moved toward the edge of the water. As I stepped into the water, a change started to come over me. I still felt like the same inquisitive, optimistic girl inside, but I noticed my legs started to tingle as scales started to appear. I quickly hopped back out of the water and they went away. Cautiously, I dipped my toe back into the water, and again, purple, green, and turquoise blue scales started forming, running up my legs and ending at my waist. I went in deeper, and as I got up to my belly button, then my shoulders, my legs fused together, and I realized I was half fish, half human girl. I had gained the ability to change into a mermaid. I couldn't believe it. I turned into Sophia, the mermaid girl. As I swam back to the beach, the same thing happened in reverse, and my legs separated and I was able to walk again. I dove into the water with excitement, opened my eyes, and found that I could see and breathe with no problem at all. I liked this new place I found myself in and couldn't wait to explore the underwater world and the beautiful island. All right, the next part we wrote about was part 3, and that was when the problem in the story presents itself. After I realized I was amphibious and could breathe in and out of water, I fearlessly dove in and began exploring the crystal clear water. I was in a large cove. The land curling around the water made the water a calm and warm, with an opening far out that led to the ocean. I swam down under the water, and looking in the kelp beds, I saw the flipping of fins that looked a lot like mine. As I swam closer and closer to the kelp, I noticed that it wasn't all seaweed. Some of what I thought was kelp was actually hair, attached to real mermaids. I decided to swim even closer, slowly, to get a better look, and several mermaids and mermen darted away. While I didn't want to scare them, I also wanted them to understand I was friendly, so I stopped and floated for a moment. I waved and smiled and noticed that while many of them had swum away, a few stayed close, curiously looking at me. One girl even swam a little closer to me. She looked back at the others as if asking them to stay close, then bravely came toward me. I smiled again, and she returned my smile. I decided to try speaking and said hello, but it all came out like bubbles and squeaks. She pointed to the surface of the water, so we both swam up until our faces broke through, and she burst into laughter as soon as she took a breath of air. "Who are you?" she asked. "Where are you from? We have never seen you before." I told her my name was Sophia and all about how I had arrived and what happened when I walked into the water. As I told her about my experience, her face changed from curious to excited. "Do you mean to tell me that you can walk on the island as well as swim in the water like us?" I nodded. Other merfolk were coming to the surface as well, one by one, and quite a group of them were listening to our conversation. She swam over to them and they huddled up together. All I could hear were murmurs of excitement. She swam back to me. "We need you, Sophia. We had our mother of pearl stolen from us, our most sacred gem. Without it, our queen is crying and sad every day. Do you think you can cross the island and bring it back from Deadly the dragon?" My jaw dropped with surprise. I wasn't sure I could do what they were asking of me. All right, the next part is part 4, and that's where I had 3 problems. The rising action starts happening in the story. After giving it a moment's thought, I realized that the reason I was probably sent to this land was because they needed me. As silly as it sounded, I was probably the chosen one like you see in the movies, and answered that yes, I would help them. The merfolk all cheered as I swam to the water's edge and started walking up the beach. I knew the dragons usually lived in caves, and that meant that I should probably head toward the mountain in the dead center of the island. I was heading into the jungle when I heard a hissing noise. Snakes. I hated snakes. When I looked up, there was the biggest, fattest, longest snake I'd ever seen staring me right in the eyes. I froze and looked right back at him, feeling like I was becoming hypnotized. I started imagining and feeling like being snug in my bed when all of a sudden I realized I was being hypnotized. I forced my eyes away from the snake's eyes and realized that it had started to wrap itself around me and squeeze. I freed my hands and pushed the snake away, escaping just moments before that deadly snake made me its lunch. Now I was running through the jungle. I forgot about being careful and almost ran into a soupy, watery swamp. I tried stepping on one stone, but as I put my weight on it, the stone sunk into the swamp, quickly disappearing. Looking around, I saw turtles swimming, huge tropical leaves, and jungle vines. Maybe I could make a boat. I quickly picked several of the largest leaves and tied them in a boat shape with the jungle vines. Then I lassoed several turtles and held on to them as I climbed onto my leaf boat. Before I knew it, the turtles were pulling me across the swampy waters. On the other side, I untied them and set them free, thanking them for the help. Now I was at the base of the mountain. High above me, I could see a cave with smoke coming out of the hole. The mountain was steep and rocky, and I wasn't sure how to climb it. Just then I spied a big, strong mountain goat. I had taken a bit of coconut before I set out on my quest, so I held it out to the mountain goat, hoping to lure it to me. It stopped and looked at me, then cautiously came toward me. Once it started eating from my hand, I petted it until it became friendly. In one swift move, I hopped on its back, and it started galloping and jumping up the mountain, trying to shake me off. I hung on for dear life as he continued higher and higher up the mountain. When we were close enough to the cave, I hopped off his back, and he took off into the woods. Now that I was close to the cave, I needed to make a plan to get inside. So that's where I left off last week. So now we're going to get to the climax of the story. So this is the part of the story where you're going to solve that big problem in the story. All that rising action has built tension, and this is where your reader will be excited to see how you solve the story. Remember, and this is really important to remember, it's okay to be inspired by things that have happened in your life, movies that you've seen, stories that you've read. It's okay. Good writers write what they know from their experience. Your schema can be based on all kinds of things, even inspired by other writers. So remember, we're looking for powerful verbs, and I'm going to write down the powerful verbs I used in my story. So here is my story this week, and I like it. I'm really falling in love with my story. I remembered reading somewhere that dragons liked to sleep on top of their treasure, so I knew the mermaid's mother of pearl be kept close to Deadly the dragon as he puffed smoke in his cave. That puts a visual of smoke coming out of his nostrils. That was another thing. This is obviously a fire-breathing dragon named Deadly. It didn't seem like many living creatures made it out of the cave alive. I reflected on how I'd used the jungle vines to tie to the turtles to pull me across the swamp. I thought about how the goat had helped me climb the steep walls and how a snake had nearly hypnotized me. I quickly gathered some vines and tied them together, making a long rope. I tied one end of it to my waist and the other to a sturdy tree at the mouth of the cave that was also near the cliff's edge. While I was gathering, While I was gathering vines, I spied. I saw a snake or spied. I like spied. It's a much more powerful verb. I spied a snake just like the one who had almost hypnotized me. I'm going to move this a little closer so you can see the chart paper a little better. Without looking at its eyes, I dragged its writhing body. I like that word writhing, but it's an adjective here. It could be a verb, but it's used like an adjective here. While I was gathering vines, I spied a snake just like the one who had almost hypnotized me. And without looking at its eyes, dragged its writhing body to the edge of the cave. The snake slinked into the cave while I piled vines on top of me for camouflage. So I liked that word, slinked. Slinked. Whoops. Slinked sounds sneaky. It doesn't, like if the snake went into the cave, it would just go into the cave. But that it slinks makes it sound sneaky and a little nefarious. I watched the snake move toward a pile of gold and gems and saw the dragon dozing nearby. I could have used sleeping, but I found dozing is kind of that act of a little bit sleepy, a little bit awake, and so it adds to that tension that I have to be really careful as I'm going into that cave. I scooted a little further in the cave. Not went, I scooted. So I'm slow and carefully moving in, kind of scooching in closer. I scooted a little further in the cave looking for the mother of pearl, all the while keeping my eyes on the snake and dragon situation. The snake reached deadly and slithered up its neck. I'm sorry, my handwriting isn't so great on here. This is really wobbly. It moves around a lot and it bends as I'm writing, so it makes it so it's a little bit funny. Okay, sorry. I scooted a little further in the cave looking for the mother of pearl, all the while keeping my eyes on the snake and dragon situation. The snake reached deadly and slithered up its neck. The dragon stirred and began to wake. I froze, and just then I spied it. Did I already use spied? I did. The mother of pearl gem. It was gleaming. Not sitting there. It's gleaming. That way I know that it was glowing and shining and attracting attention. Next to Deadly the dragon's right claw, inches away from his scorching, smoky breath. As the snake wound himself tighter around the dragon's neck, Deadly woke up to see the snake looking right into his eyes. So I like that he wound. Hypnotized. Okay, sorry. Deadly woke up to see the snake looking right into his eyes. Deadly froze. Hypnotized. It was time to make my move. I dropped the vines I was hiding behind and dashed to the mother of pearl. I could have used ran, but I thought dashed was even faster than ran. I snatched it up while Deadly continued to be under the snake's spell. Snatched. I didn't take it. I snatched it because I'm going fast. As I was streaking towards the cave's opening, I heard a noise behind me. Deadly was struggling with the snake, pushing it away and glaring at me as I escaped with the mother of pearl. So he's glaring at me. I think I'm going to move this down just a little bit because I'm running out of room. There we go. And I'll back this up just a touch so you can see a little bit more. Where was I? Deadly was struggling with the snake, pushing it away and glaring at me as I escaped with the mother of pearl. Escaped. Do you see all these powerful verbs I used? I flew to the edge of the cliff. Just as Deadly came bounding out of the cave, I leaped off the side. Whoa. So I have flew, bounding, and leaped. As I was streaking towards the cave's opening, I heard a noise behind me. Deadly was struggling with the snake, pushing away and glaring at me as I escaped with the mother of pearl. I flew to the edge of the cliff. Just as Deadly came bounding out of the cave, I leaped off the side, hanging on tight to the mother of pearl and hoping that the vines would hold me. The dragon roared at the edge of the cliff. Fire singed the treetops, but I had made it safely out of his reach, landing safely and luckily in a soft pile of leaves under a thick canopy of tree and bush leaves. I lay still as a mouse, hardly daring to breathe, while Deadly stormed above me, trying to find his target. So, the dragon roared, and he stormed. I think that's everything. Oh, and fire singed. Okay, so all of those verbs are words that I used in my story to make it sound just a little more exciting. So I'm not expecting you to change every single verb that you use to be a powerful verb, but I am challenging you to find 3 words when you say went or said or go or something like that that's really like basic and simple and straightforward. Walked, ran. I want you to challenge yourself today and see if you can change at least 3 of those words to be powerful verbs. I hope you were able to hear how my story became more powerful with those verbs that had deeper meaning, that helped us paint a better picture of how the dragon moved, the snake moved, and how I moved in that story. So my suggestion to you is write it all out and then go back to it and change a couple words. Thank you so much for watching today. I can't wait to see your stories. Please continue to share them with me. You can share them on Google Docs if you're using your Chromebook. You can have your parents take a picture of it and send it to me. And that can happen through Dojo or email. All right? Love you guys. Have a great Wednesday. Bye.